From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Put your hand behind your back. I can't breathe. 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 I can't breathe.
Once again, police beating up on people.
Back up.
Right here.
Back up and get on that step.
Okay.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Those were the final words of Eric Garner before he died after being placed in a police chokehold in New York City. Last night, protesters took to the streets chanting the same words as a grand jury cleared the police officer in the case. The Justice Department has now launched a federal investigation.
If you are choking a man who is down with other police helping and hovering over him, even if the guidelines don't kick in your mind, even if the law don't kick on your mind, after 11 times of I can't breathe, when does your humanity kick in?
Today, a conversation. We bring you Graham Weatherspoon, a retired police detective, Vince Warren of the Center for Constitutional Rights, and more. All that and more coming up. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Justice Department has announced it will launch a civil rights investigation into the death of Eric Garner after a grand jury decided not to charge a white police officer for causing his death. Garner is an African-American father of 6, as well as a grandfather. He died in July after being placed in a chokehold and wrestled to the ground by New York police. The grand jury's decision set off protests across New York that shut down parts of the city, including the Brooklyn Bridge, the West Side Highway, and the Lincoln Tunnel. Protesters also staged a die-in in Grand Central. At least 83 people were arrested. Garner's death occurred just weeks before Michael Brown was killed by a police officer in Ferguson and sparked a national debate about police use of excessive force and the New York Police Department's policy of cracking down on low-level offenses. Garner was first confronted on July 17th by police for allegedly selling single untaxed cigarettes known as Lucy's on the streets of Staten Island. What happened next was recorded by a bystander. In the video, the officer, Daniel Pantaleo, can be seen placing Garner, who was unarmed, in a chokehold just before he collapsed onto the sidewalk. While officers held him down, Garner cried out at least 11 times. Eric Garner's mother last night spoke out after the grand jury released its decision.
I am truly disappointed in the grand jury's decision this evening. I don't know what video they were looking at. Evidently, it wasn't the same one that the rest of the world was looking at. You know, how could we put our trust in the justice system when they fail us like this?
The headline in the New York Daily News this morning read, "Grand Jury Clears Choke Cop. We Can't Breathe." In the wake of the grand jury's decision, over 80 people were arrested as protesters shut down parts of New York City, including the Brooklyn Bridge, the Lincoln Tunnel, West Side Highway, and 6th Avenue around Rockefeller Center, where the Christmas tree lighting ceremony was taking place. The Justice Department has announced it'll launch a civil rights investigation into Eric Garner's death. We'll have more on the case after headlines. The decision by the grand jury came as more than 100 people packed a church in Cleveland, Ohio, for the memorial service of Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old African-American boy shot dead by police last month. Rice, who was in 6th grade, was killed after a 911 caller reported seeing the boy with a gun, which the caller repeatedly said seemed fake. Video shows Cleveland police officer Timothy Lohman fatally shooting Rice immediately after leaving his cruiser from a distance of about 10 feet. Now, reports have emerged Officer Lohman was deemed unfit for police service 2 years ago when he worked in the suburb of Independence. A letter from a superior specifically criticizes Lohman's performance and firearms training, saying, quote, he could not follow simple directions, could not communicate clear thoughts nor recollections, he said. And he said his performance was dismal. The Philippines is bracing for another super typhoon this weekend, with thousands being told to evacuate from areas already devastated last year by Typhoon Haiyan. Schools and workplaces have closed down as forecasts show Typhoon Hagupit could impact 2/3 of Filipino provinces and reach Category 5 status. The storm is on a path similar to Haiyan, which left more than 7,000 dead or missing last year. It comes as the group German Watch lists the Philippines as the country most impacted by climate change last year. It's the third year in a row a major storm in the Philippines has coincided with the United Nations Climate Change Summit, where the disproportionate harm borne by countries least responsible for climate change has been a top issue. Speaking at the summit in Lima, Peru, UN Climate Chief Christiana Figueres acknowledged emissions limits due to be agreed upon at next year's summit in Paris will not be enough to avoid the worst impacts of climate change.
You know, because we have a pretty good sense of what countries will be able to do in the short run, that the sum total of efforts of both governments and non-state actors will not be able to put us on the path for 2 degrees next year.
Democracy Now! Will broadcast from the UN Climate Summit in Lima, Peru, all next week. The Colombian government and FARC rebels have agreed to resume peace talks aimed at ending a 50-year conflict. President Juan Manuel Santos had suspended the talks until the FARC released an army general and other hostages captured last month. Iran has launched airstrikes against Islamic State targets in Iraq as the United States continues its assault on the militants in Iraq and Syria. But speaking in Washington, D.C., White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest said Iran and the United States are not working together.
At this point, our calculation about the wisdom of cooperating militarily with the Iranians has not changed. We're not going to do it.
Al-Qaeda militants in Yemen have released a video threatening to execute a U.S. journalist taken hostage last year. Luke Summers is a photojournalist who was captured in the Yemeni capital of Sana'a. U.S. commandos reportedly tried to rescue Summers last week, but missed him, instead freeing several other hostages, most of them Yemeni. U.S. lawmakers have reached a deal on a $585 billion military bill which expands the U.S. offensive in Iraq and extends training of Syrian rebels for another 2 years. The measure adds $1.6 billion to train Iraqi security forces. This comes amidst reports of disarray in the Army's ranks as Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi has revealed the presence of 50,000 so-called ghost troops, fraudulent names which generate salaries, that are then collected by Army officers. The bill also deals a blow to efforts to close Guantanamo prison by maintaining a ban on prisoner transfers to U.S. soil. And the bill includes some steps to curb rape in military ranks, but keeps assault cases in the military chain of command. It comes as new data shows reports of sexual assault in the U.S. military have increased 8%. More women have come forward publicly to accuse comedian Bill Cosby of sexual assault. 3 women joined together at a news conference, including Beth Ferrier, who told her story to the National Enquirer in 2005. The tabloid ended up killing the article in exchange for a favorable front-page interview with Bill Cosby.
I believe that Mr. Cosby drugged me and sexually assaulted me that night. For years, I did not tell anyone about what he had done to me because I was afraid I felt threatened by him. I did not think anyone would believe me.
The women were joined by attorney Gloria Allred, who urged Bill Cosby to waive the statute of limitations and let the cases go to trial or provide a $100 million compensation fund for the more than 20 women who have now come forward to report assaults dating back half a century. Cosby has canceled his performances planned for this weekend in Tarrytown, New York, after about half of the attendees returned their tickets to the sold-out shows. In Oklahoma, police have arrested an 18-year-old for rape in a case that sparked a mass walkout by students in the town of Norman. Tristan Cole Kilman Harden has been charged with raping a 16-year-old girl in September, and at least 2 other victims have also come forward. After the victims faced harassment at Norman High School, hundreds of students with the campaign Yes, All Daughters staged a walkout last month to protest the school's treatment of victims. The Supreme Court has heard arguments in a case about the rights of employees who become pregnant. The case centers on former UPS driver Peggy Young. After Young became pregnant, UPS refused to reassign her to lighter duties, instead suspending her from work and cutting off her health benefits. She spoke outside the court.
It's principle. It can't be right to make me choose to start my family and to support my family. So it's principle. I should be able to do both.
The case comes as the Labor Department has issued a rule to prevent discrimination against employees of federal contractors based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. The rule puts into place an anti-discrimination law signed by President Obama in July. Texas and 16 other states have filed a lawsuit against the Obama administration over its plans to provide relief from deportations to up to 5 million undocumented immigrants. The lawsuit marks the first major legal challenge to Obama's executive action announced last month. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals has stayed the execution of a Texas prisoner with schizophrenia. Scott Panetti was due to be executed for murder on Wednesday evening, despite a lengthy history of mental illness. He represented himself at trial and attempted to subpoena JFK, the Pope, and Jesus Christ in his defense. In a statement, his attorneys called the ruling, quote, the first step in a process which will clearly demonstrate that Mr. Panetti is too severely mentally ill to be executed. And in upstate New York, a longtime peace activist has been sentenced to a 1-year conditional discharge and ordered to pay a $1,000 fine for demonstrating outside the gates of New York's Hancock Field Air National Guard Base, which is used to remotely pilot U.S. drone attacks. Mark Colville, who appeared on Democracy Now! Wednesday, was facing 2 years in prison for his role in the peaceful protest, but the judge decided not to send him to jail. Colville celebrated after the decision.
I'm a person of hope, and my hope is grounded in my fellow human beings, you know, among whom is Judge Jokel. And I choose to think the best of him, which is that perhaps on some level his conscience was moved to do something in the way of rightness and fairness and justice in this case.
And those are more than 100 people have been arrested over the past 5 years as part of nonviolent campaign against drone attacks organized by the Upstate Drone Coalition. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Narmeen Sheikh. Welcome to our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. The Justice Department has announced it will launch a civil rights investigation into the death of Eric Garner after a grand jury decided not to charge a white New York police officer for causing his death. Garner, who was an African-American father of 6, died in July after being placed in a chokehold and wrestled to the ground. The grand jury's decision set off protests across New York that shut down parts of the city, including the Brooklyn Bridge, the West Side Highway, and the Lincoln Tunnel. Protesters also staged a die-in in Grand Central. At least 83 people were arrested. Garner was first confronted on July 17th by police for allegedly selling single untaxed cigarettes known as Lucy's on the streets of Staten Island.
What happened next was recorded by a bystander named Ramsey Orta. In the video, the officer, Daniel Pantaleo, can be seen placing Garner, who is unarmed, in a chokehold just before Garner collapsed onto the sidewalk. While officers held him down, Garner cried out at least 11 times, "I can't breathe."
I'm tired of it. It stops today.
This guy right here is forcibly trying to lock somebody up for breaking up a fight.
Everybody standing here, they told me I didn't do nothing. I did not sell nothing. Because every time you see me, you want to harass me, you want to stop me, you want to sell a cigarette. I'm minding my business, officer. I'm minding my business. Please just leave me alone. I told you the last time, please just leave me alone. Please, don't touch me. Don't touch me.
Hold on.
Listen, don't touch me, please.
Came over.
Do not touch me.
Put your hand behind you.
I can't breathe. 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 I can't breathe.
Once again, police beating up on people.
Back up.
Right here.
Back up and get on that step.
Okay.
In August, a city medical examiner's office ruled Eric Garner's death a homicide, citing, quote, compression of his neck, chokehold, compression of his chest, and prone positioning during physical restraint by police. During Wednesday's demonstrations, protesters repeatedly chanted, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." The cover of today's New York Daily News features a photo of Garner in the chokehold above the words, "We can't breathe." During a press conference in Harlem Wednesday night, Eric Garner's mother, Gwen Carr, responded to the grand jury's decision not to indict the officer responsible for her son's death.
I am truly disappointed in the grand jury's decision this evening. I don't know what video they were looking at. Evidently, it wasn't the same one that the rest of the world was looking at. You know, how could we put our trust in the justice system when they fail us like this?
Before Garner's family spoke, Officer Daniel Pantaleo issued an apology. His statement read in part, quote, "It's never my intention to harm anyone, and I feel very bad about the death of Mr. Garner. My family and I include him and his family in our prayers, and I hope that they will accept my personal condolences for their loss." Garner's widow, Esau Garner, was asked by a reporter if she accepted Officer Pantaleo's apology. This was her response.
Apology. No, I could care less about his condolences. No, I could care less. He's still working. He's still getting a paycheck. He's still feeding his kids. And my husband is 6 feet under, and I'm looking for a way to feed my kids now.
Eric Garner's family says it plans to sue the city for wrongful death, pre-death pain and suffering, and civil rights violations. For more, we turn to Brandon Davidson, the nephew of Eric Garner. Brandon, welcome to Democracy Now! Again, our condolences on the death of your uncle. Your response to the grand jury clearing the officer in the chokehold death of your uncle?
It's just tragic how they can't see the video clearly. Like, me and my family, we've seen what happened. I've watched my uncle die, like, right in front of my eyes. I've never seen any of my other family members die. Like, my father, his brother died when I was 6. Never seen it. My uncle, Joseph Flagg, died last year. Didn't see him die. It's tragic for me to see my last uncle die in front of my eyes, in front of my face, live on TV. And it hurts me even more that my family, my grandmother, Gwen Carr, you seen last night on National, NN.
At the National Action Network.
Yeah. She's going through it hard. And I agree with my aunt when she says, we can't accept your apology. You say you have no intentions on harming anyone. You've waited for backup to harm my uncle. He told y'all to leave him alone. which means y'all been bothering him previous times. That's not the only time y'all bothered him. And while the guy who was recording the video saying he just broke up a fight, what does that tell you? He's not harmful. My uncle's not harmful. He just broke up a fight. What does...
Meaning that your uncle had just been a mediator in a fight. He'd broken it up. And he stepped back at the beauty, right? He was standing by that beauty salon in Staten Island on the sidewalk.
Minding his business. Where's the cigarettes that y'all, well, the police claimed that he was selling? Where's that evidence? But we have evidence that you put my uncle in a chokehold until he died.
Can you tell us a little about your uncle?
It's a lot of stories of my uncle, but like I'd see him through family reunions. He'd see me in a train station out of nowhere, like just saying, "Hey, Brandon, what's up? How's everything? How's your mom? I ain't seen her in a long time. I hope everything's well with her." And I'm telling him, you know, we are keeping our heads strong since my father passed away. And he's been mourning since my father's passed. And he was even mourning more. Like
was he your father's brother?
Yes. Like the last time I've seen Eric before that incident was my other uncle, Joseph Flagg, who died last year in Jersey, being gunned down by the perpetrator. And, you know, he wasn't harmful at all. You know, he was, in my eyes, from my experience, he was a good man. I mean, him and my aunt, you know, they'll have their ups and downs, but at the end of the day, he's in her life. He's in his children's life. Most of all, he's in his grandchildren's life, my cousin's daughters. He's in their life.
And what did you think of you and your family, of all the protesters who turned out last night against this decision?
Well, it was peaceful. That was a good thing, but it was a great thing to see people come together, you know, to rally against the system. But that shouldn't just happen, you know, during the time of anyone's death. You know, people should come together, period, instead of just one incident.
What do you think needs to change?
The system, period. Justice. Like, we need justice, period. Because if there's injustice, then what do we have?
Where were you yesterday when the decision came down, and did it surprise you?
I mean, it didn't surprise me. I was hurt, but it didn't surprise me. I was home. It was my day off from work, and that's what I was waiting for. I was waiting for the news to tell me the cop would not be indicted. It didn't surprise me at all. It just hurt me. It just stung me. You know, I mourned, and, you know, the best thing I did was to keep strong, because I called my cousin, his daughter, Erica. I called her, make sure she was all right. I called my grandmother before she went to the NAN, National American Network. I called my aunt. She was at work, she was at work, I'm sorry. I just basically called everyone in the family to see if they was all right.
Well, we want to thank you very much, Brandon Davidson, for making the trip here today. Brandon Davidson is the nephew of Eric Garner. It pains me to play in front of you, although I know you've seen it, so I don't know how many hundreds of times, if you watch TV, that video of your uncle saying, "I can't breathe," 11 times. This is Democracy Now! When we come back, Vince Warren will join us. He's the head of the Center for Constitutional Rights. We'll also be joined by a retired police detective talking about the culture of police, those who do right and those who don't. Stay with us.
And any man who knows a thing knows he knows not a damn thing at all. And every time I felt the hurt and I felt the giving getting me up off the wall, I'm just gonna take a minute and let it ride. I'm just gonna take a minute and let it breathe. I'm just gonna take take a minute and let it ride. I'm just gonna take a minute and let it breathe. How did Mandela get the will to surpass the everyday when injustice had him caged and trapped in every way? How did Gandhi ever withstand the hunger strikes and all? Didn't do it to gain power or money, if I recall, it's a gift. I guess I'll pass it on. Mother thinks it'll lift the stress of Babylon. Mother knows. My mother, she suffered blows. I don't know how we survived such violent episodes. I was so worried. It hurt to see you bleed, but as soon as you came out the hospital, you gave me sweets. Yeah, they tried to take you from me, but you still only gave them some prayers and sympathy. Dear mama, you helped me write this by showing me to give is priceless. And any man who knows a thing knows he knows not a damn thing at all. And every time I felt the hurt and I felt the giving getting me up off the wall, I'm just gonna take a minute and let it ride.
Kanan singing Take a Minute. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh as we go to the streets of New York last night. Thousands of people shut down the West Side Highway, went to Times Square, traveled throughout the boroughs, some scores of people, then hundreds of people, and thousands. Renee Feltz was in Times Square.
I'm Bob Bailey from Brooklyn, New York. Oh, I'm out here actually working, but I have a lunch break, so I took my lunch break time to protest.
And what went through your mind when you heard the grand jury's decision not to indict the officer responsible for Eric Garner's death?
It's like they keep on making excuses for the officers. They're not being liable for their actions, and that's horrible.
The blue wall has to be broken.
My name is Kay Gaines. I represent Brooklyn, the island called New York City.
And I heard you say the blue wall has to be broken, yelling to the police officers. Explain why you're here and what you're saying to them.
The blue wall has to be broken. A lot of the officers that was part of the Eric Garner situation, I mix up Mike Brown and Eric Garner because they're one and the same. It has to be broken. You can see that the cops didn't want to be a part of that. It was a couple of cops that are actually the ones who were supposed to be prosecuted that did not get into trouble. So what's happening is we're not getting justice. And they know we're not getting justice. They don't want to be out here, but they have to because this is how they feed their families. But they also have families and children that's going to go through the same thing if they don't do something about it.
Hi, my name is Rodrice Vincent. I'm a Brooklyn native, but I live in the Bronx. I'm out here tonight because I'm a mother of 3 children, 2 of them which are black boys. I fear for the lives of my sons. My daughter, my youngest, is 6 years old. When she looks at a police officer, she's afraid. She's not looking at them as somebody who's there to protect and serve her. And at such a young age, so innocent, for even her to be aware that police hurt people that look like her dad, that look like her brother, that look like her uncle, and they don't have to be doing anything.
I'm Zakia Ali, and I'm here because I don't have nowhere else that I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be here in solidarity with the people. I'm a teacher. I teach my students to be obedient. I teach my students to think. I teach my students to be critical, but most of all, I teach them to be human beings. But obviously, I feel like a hypocrite because what I'm teaching my students is not reciprocated. And one of these days, my school, which is predominantly African American, several of my students are walking down the street and they could be the next Eric Garner, they could be the next Tamir Rice, they could be the next Michael Brown. But what we see right now is an indictment on black skin. No indictment on the cops, but an indictment on black skin, and an indictment on people that they feel is less than.
Some of the voices of people protesting in the streets, that was Times Square. Among those who were in Times Square was Spike Lee and his son. Vincent Warren is with us right now, Executive Director of the Center for Constitutional Rights. Vince, yesterday the Staten Island grand jury cleared Daniel Pantaleo, the officer who actually put Eric Garner in that chokehold. Your response?
As a lawyer, I was absolutely shocked by this because really when you have video evidence like that, the evidence that we all saw, that tells more than half of the story. What I think really ended up happening was that the prosecutor, very much like Ferguson, I understand, presented all of the evidence to the grand jury. It was essentially a failing to secure an indictment. It's the prosecutor's responsibility to get an indictment, and when the prosecutors start shifting the blame and people start thinking, oh, it was the grand jury that didn't indict the police officer, that's when we know that we have a problem. It's a systemic problem where the prosecutors are not taking responsibility for what their jobs are.
Well, could you explain what a grand jury is, when it's called, and what the failures of that system are? Because we saw the same thing in Ferguson just 2 weeks ago.
Sure. Grand juries are it's an old process that actually came from England, and very often prosecutors will convene a secret group of jurors to hear information and evidence in order to determine whether charges can be brought against the person that they're seeking to charge. And so in both of these cases, the prosecutors convened these grand juries. But what was different about these grand juries than most is that the prosecutors laid out all of the evidence and essentially asked the grand jury to figure it out. Everybody knows that you can indict a ham sandwich if you do it right. There are hundreds of thousands of black, Latino men that get indicted every single day, and a lot of them for nothing. So it's really shocking that we have a police officer with this videotape when all you really have to do is to show the tape, hand out the popcorn, and say to the grand jury, well, how do you vote? That's how you secure an indictment on this case. You don't have a big, broad conversation about what the police officer was feeling at the time.
How rare is it not to secure an indictment?
It is exceedingly rare. You know, in federal grand juries, in 2010, there were 160,000 grand jury presentations, and only 11 of them ended up with non-indictments. And it is
11 of 160,000.
Exactly. And it is even more rare to get an indictment when it has to do with a police officer. And that's what the issue is here. It's the fact that there are cops that are in the dock that changes everything for the prosecutors.
Well, what role do district attorneys play in the way in which a grand jury unfolds? A number of people have pointed out that Staten Island District Attorney Daniel Donovan was considered pro-police.
It's hard to be a district attorney in America and not be pro-police for the following reason. Your entire job description depends on cooperation with the police department. Police officers present evidence, they preserve evidence, they collect evidence, and they give witness testimony in virtually every criminal trial in America. And then now we're trying to pretend that these same prosecutors and police officers that work together every single day should be on opposite sides of the V, and that they'll both be acting in independent ways. It simply doesn't happen.
So when a police officer kills someone, should there automatically be a special prosecutor?
Absolutely, and I wouldn't even limit it to killing. I think that in any opportunity for the district attorney to prefer any criminal charges against a police officer, that there should automatically be an independent prosecutor to avoid what we all know is a conflict of interest between the prosecutor's office and the police department.
Well, on Wednesday, Attorney General Eric Holder said the Justice Department was launching a federal civil rights investigation into the death of Eric Garner. He also stressed that all lives must be protected equally.
Now, we've all seen the video of Mr. Garner's arrest. His death, of course, was a tragedy. All lives must be valued. All lives. Mr. Garner's death is one of several recent incidents across our great country that have tested the sense of trust that must exist between law enforcement and the communities they are charged to serve and to protect. This is